Hey looters, Flutes here. Today I want to talk about Curse of Strahd, the 5th edition D&D campaign module, my favorite one, specifically this tier list that I made for the Destined Ally that you can get from the Taraka card reading today on Flutes Loot. Before I get too far into this tier list video, I want to remind everyone that flutesloot.com is where we get most of our content. We write content there and then we make videos about it here. You can follow the link in the description to find an article about this very topic where I go into each of the destined allies that you can potentially get and I rank them and I go over my thoughts on them, similar to what I'll do on this video. But in this video, it will be a little bit different because I'm going to focus on the DM's perspective. In the article, I focused mostly on from the player's perspective, how useful the allies would be and how fun they are, with a little bit of DM perspective. But this time I'm going to just get the DM's perspective of how these destined allies can be used, how fun they are for you in your narrative, and how much they're going to affect what your party does. That's what I'm going to focus on today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to have more discussions with Curse of Strahd enthusiasts. And don't forget to check out videos by my wife, Opal, who also helps with content on the website. We're a duo, married couple, and she's delightful, so check out her videos too. I will point out that I'm not going to be assuming sidekick rules in this video. I do mention sidekick rules from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything in the article I wrote for the allies that do qualify. I might just mention it briefly, but I'm not going to take sidekick status. I'll pretty much go module as written and not any like homebrew or variant rule options, all that stuff. So first up we have Arabelle. Arabelle is the Vistani little girl who is taken by Bluto and is about to be drowned in the lake if the players don't save her. A lot of people in the community love her because they add a lot to her personality. There's not a lot to her in the module itself, and she is just a child with very few hit points. She'll get hit and she's just a goner. She won't worry about using her action to do the Inspire ability that the Destined Allies get, which is a big part of being a Destined Ally as you get the new action added to your stat block, Inspire, where you can use an action to inspire someone else you can see when Strahd is around. But if Strahd wants to kill you, it makes it tough to use you, and so Arabelle's going to go in D, because she's a bench warmer. She qualifies to be a sidekick, which can make her more fun and more survivable, of course. And you can have some fun with the Vistani when she's traveling with the group, especially because Arigal and Luvash, her dad, are going to not take kindly to her traveling with the adventuring group, especially because they're quite aware that when adventurers come in, they're the playthings of Strahd, and so Arabelle would be in danger being around them. It's debatable whether Strahd would try to kill her like it says the Destined Allies typically provoke out of him as he just senses they are a threat, because she's a Vistani. But do you think Strahd would kill a Vistani little girl? That's up to you. Arabelle is also, unbeknownst to Strahd, kind of related to him, at least related to Madame Ava. If you recall, Madame Ava is, I believe, the half-sister of Strahd, though he doesn't know her true identity and she hides that from everyone. And Arabelle is related to her, so she kind of can have some of those, like, seer abilities. It would be interesting to have Strahd maybe sense a familial tie to Arabelle that makes him hesitant, especially because she's a Vistani, to take action against her. And maybe he finds her curious just like the adventurers, and so he doesn't try to kill her right out, like the book says he will with Destined Allies. Speaking of Vistani, next up is Arigal. Arigal has an assassin stat block, and he is one of the Vistani at the camp outside of Vallaki. He's a lot of fun because you can use him as one of the delivery boys, let's say, for Strahd, delivering letters to the players in the Into the Mists part of the campaign, where he delivers a letter and he's the reason they come to Barovia. He deceives them, and then they see him in Barovia and he's like, oh hey, kind of awkward. If he's the Destined Ally after delivering that letter, that can really add an interesting dynamic to the campaign. Arigal is one of the most powerful Destined Allies, but he does come with an interesting caveat where he is prophesied by Madame Ava to have a rotten soul and he will betray the party, is what is implied. I find that having the party deciding whether to trust or distrust him is really interesting, especially if he's kind of open about their feelings towards him whenever they show distrust. I highly recommend Arigal. He's not going to make the campaign on easy mode, and it is notable that his poison attacks are not resisted by Strahd. Strahd does not resist poison damage. A lot of people assume that undead aren't affected by poison, but poison still works quite well. The Amber Temple Golems and other constructs in the module, he's going to have a hard time against those, so keep him away from them. Arigal's easily in the A tier. A is for Arigal. Arigal has high HP, 78, AC is good at 15, gets sneak attack, assassinate, evasion. He gets multi-attack, a ranged attack option, poison effects. It could be fun for you to use his Thieves' Cant language that he knows to speak with other Vistani to make your party nervous. Have you ever been around someone who's speaking another language in front of you? There's like this subconscious feeling that they're talking about you. Arigal will make your party feel that way if he suddenly starts talking Thieves' Cant, which sounds like a language they understand, but it won't make sense. And they'll be like, what was that about? And he'd be like, oh, nothing. He's also great with acrobatics. He's okay with deception and perception, but his stealth is plus 11, so he can really help you set up ambushes. Next up is Cloven Bellevue. He is one of the mongrel folk who specifically serves the abbot at the Abbey of St. Markovia. He plays his violin, his viol, I think is what it is, and he's got a little baby head on his shoulder that goes to sleep when he plays music. He loves wine, and all the other mongrel folk hate him. I believe he is the worst destined ally you can get other than having no destined ally. And maybe having no destined ally is better. I'm not sure. He's in the Suicide Squad. Because to get him, you're going to have to kill the abbot, probably. And while that is doable, it's not worth getting Cloven out of it. He requires wine all the time. He needs his music to be useful. And he doesn't have any standout skills. His HP is only 26, which is higher than some of the other NPCs that you can get. But what's he going to do with it? His speed is 20, so he's not getting around well. He does have multi-attack, but what's he doing with that? And his AC is 11. He does qualify to be a sidekick, which would make him more useful. He could maybe use his mimicry ability to be useful, but even being diplomatic with the other mongrel folk, they hate him because he sold out and basically became their taskmaster, feeder. You know, he just obeyed the abbot and left them in their cages. He'll make the mongrel folk hate you. He'll make everyone in the villages of Barovia hate you. Yeah, he's just gonna make everything more difficult. And you'll be like, why did we recruit this guy? Next is Davian Martikov, the patriarch of the Martikov family, the Order of the Feathers, and the Wizard of Wine's winery. He has some beef with his son he needs to work out, but this Were-Raven, that's important too, is an interesting old man. He has 31 HP, so he's not a sitting duck, but he could die from a single fireball, which I've seen happen. A big benefit to having lycanthropy, being a Were-Raven, is he's immune to mundane weapons. If they're not silvered or magical, they're not going to hurt him. He does have multi-attack, and he can fly. And it's important to note that lycanthropy can be passed on, so if your party convinced him, he might turn them all into Were-Ravens. Then they could all fly and be immune to mundane weaponry. Rules as written, Strahd, his claw attacks would do a lot less damage because only the necrotic damage would hurt them. He'd have to use his long-tooth sword, which is magical, to harm them outright with his attacks. That might make them less susceptible to Strahd's attacks, though, again, he still has options to hurt them. Working with the Order of the Feathers can be interesting because they're an excellent spy network for your party. They're not really warriors. They can open you up to suddenly have a lot more information about what's going on in Barovia with their ravens around the area. He feeds well into the Babala Saga storyline, the Esther Hill storyline, and with some of my edits I suggested to make Kresk more interesting, Kresk becomes a lot more interesting with the Martikovs as well. Similar to Cloven, he also, as a Were-Raven, has a mimicry ability, so that could come in handy sometimes if the party's extra tricky and maybe uses illusion magic. He could appear to be someone he's not. And his passive perception is 16, so it's going to be difficult for people to sneak up on you and get the surprise on you. You might be surprised, but Erwin might not be, and so he might prevent you from being ambushed. He's a crotchety old man, and he feeds into a lot of different plot points throughout the map. From the party's perspective, he would be a B in my article, but I'm going to give him an A from the DM's perspective. Next is Father Donovich from the church in the village of Barovia. Father Donovich has a hoarse voice when you meet him because he's been praying all night, trying to get the Morning Lord to cleanse his son of vampirism, Doru. It's one of the first quests that's typically picked up. The party needs to figure out what to do with Donovich and his son, Doru. Donovich is crazy. He's mad. is what the book says, but not in a like woo-hoo-hoo silly way. He's just, honestly, he's suicidal. Like, you see a noose in his church. He mourns his son. It never mentions Doru's mother. It's just Donovich, and there's no mother of Doru to be seen. So have some fun figuring out what happened to her. His AC is 10, his HP is 9. Qualifies to be a sidekick, true, and he has some good spells. No matter what level you are, Bless will always be helpful. Another thing about Father Donovich is that in order to recruit him, you will need to slay Doru, or maybe be creative in settling that in some way. Doru is extremely dangerous when the players will probably meet Donovich. Some of the more interesting points about Donovich is that he has a lot of lore from the Barovian Valley, or at least the Barovian Village. So if you want to do more there, he's really great to have. He also still believes that Kresk is a bastion of good at the Abbey of St. Markovia. He's a built-in way to get your party to head that way, and he'll even suggest that Irina would be safer at the Abbey. If you want to use the Abbey and Kresk, and I highly recommend you do, Donovich is a great way to seed that idea and push your players towards that area. Donovich can sit comfortably in the B tier because he won't define your campaign, but he is a stalwart with his low-level spellcasting. Even though he's not the easiest to keep alive, he can get you to some different areas, and he has more ties to the people in the village of Barovia than most NPCs. Next up is Esmeralda Davanir. She is one of the NPCs that I actually have a problem with. She's great. She's a great character. She's powerful, useful, but as a destined ally, I don't dig it. Here's why. Destined allies, I feel, should dramatically change the way the campaign goes in how they affect the party. Esmeralda is kind of a built-in mechanic for the campaign already. I've yet to see a campaign where Esmeralda is not recruited into the party. So it seems like a waste to make her the destined ally when it seems like she's supposed to be a useful monster hunter to join the party and help their survivability. So while I gave her an A from the player perspective of how useful she is and everything, from the DM perspective, I have to give her, man, where am I going to put her? It's going to be B or C. She is a Vistani, so that is interesting, and she has ties to, the mystery of Van Richten and who he is, where he is. And I think she's one of the more interesting NPCs to have with you for Old Bone Grinder as well. I'm going to stick to my guns, and I just don't think I would ever make Esmeralda, and there's going to be a few other NPCs this way, into a destined ally. She's almost always going to be in the party or involved in an alliance with them anyway. So I'm going to put her here at C from the DM perspective. Again, she's great. And the article I wrote goes over all the reasons she's great. She's got magic items, survivability, spellcasting, multi-attacks, like 3 attacks, and monster knowledge. She's amazing. She fits the theme. She's a Vistani, so that's interesting. Great from the player's perspective. They want to have her around. Destined ally, DM perspective, not very interesting. Along that same line is Irina Koliana. Irina is another one of the NPCs that I think is built into the campaign to be an ally to the party. She has low HP and is not much of a combatant, could qualify to be a sidekick, which is notable, and I find her enjoyable to roleplay in the dark world of Barovia. She's interesting to interact with Strahd and a cool character. I think she's great to wield Sergei's sword, the Sunblade. I also think Irina is very interesting to have in the party when they're interacting with people who know she is of interest to Strahd, and that may mean different things to different people. I like to use the Brides of Strahd as mechanisms where they may try to subtly get Irina killed, as is evident in the castle in the former servants' quarters and some of the writings on the walls. Irina is not well liked by the other people in the castle because they all want Strahd's attention. They don't want her hogging it. Irina won't be targeted by Strahd for death, so she is more survivable in that way, and she can be an anti-fireball, like a fireball deterrent for Strahd, because he doesn't want to blow her up with everyone else. She comes built in with a little bodyguard in Ismark, so you're probably going to get him too. I think she is more interesting. She's almost bound to go with the party, but at the same time, I found it was pretty easy for players to forget her and just want to leave her somewhere because they think she's not survivable or not useful, because that's just the way players tend to think. So since she is in the realm of possibly being someone who would be in the party anyway, kind of like Esmeralda, but maybe less so because she's not powerful, I think she actually can be campaign defining to have her in the party as a destined ally. So I found that she is more interesting than the other automatic allies. I thought I was going to rate her lower from the DM perspective, but the more I think about it, I'm willing to give her an A. which is much higher than the C ranking I give her from the player perspective. Because like I said, players tend to just forget about her until I tend to make them need to remember her. And so DM perspective, I think she's far more interesting than the players give her credit. Pretty much any story in Barovia becomes more interesting if Irina is part of the group, whether it be Strahd allies who don't know who she is, and so she can, I don't know if it's in her character, but she could invoke who she is to make them think twice about harming her, you know? And other places like the Abbey, it'd be really interesting to have her there. Though there is the pool, so if you're doing the pool in Kresk where she could potentially be spirited away with Sergei, where they together become free from Strahd's curse, then that could be trouble for you. And it also is useful to have Irina able to inspire the group, even if she's not that powerful, because she can use her action to inspire someone else when Strahd's around, and you don't really have to worry about Strahd killing her. Great ally. Then there's Ismark the Lesser, Irina's brother. She's adopted, but, you know, her brother. Ismark is a very useful combatant, especially early on, and he's at least survivable later on. If you give him a magic item, he does become more handy. His story itself is not that interesting, though, and he falls to the wayside even more so than Irina despite his combat prowess. He tends to stay with Irina, so if the party's not using her, they might feel like they have to bring her along because as a destined ally, he probably isn't going to let her leave his side if he doesn't think she's safe. I do think he is more interesting to the story than Esmeralda, so I will put him a little higher in the C tier than Esmeralda just because of his ability to be tied to Irina and the people of Barovia a little bit better than Esmeralda can. Casimir Velikov. I love this Dusk Elf. I think he is one of the best destined allies possible from player perspective and DM perspective. From player's perspective, I gave him an A. He didn't make it to the S tier, but for DM perspective, I'm giving him the S tier. It's very interesting to have his interactions with the Amber Temple, Rahadin, and most of all with his dead sister, Patrina. Her story is very interesting and compelling, and it's great to see the party kind of work out what's going on there. And if they revive her, she could potentially make it easy mode to fight Strahd. Obviously, there is the backlash of what happens with her afterwards that they may not see coming because she feigns being innocent and good. And Casimir will be ignorant to all that, right up until the point where she sacrifices him to become a lich in the Ember Temple. He's lived a long time, so he knows the area pretty well. He can easily be accessed if the players get him as the destined ally. His magic is very useful, but his magic does require creativity as well. Being elven, he also does have those fey abilities to resist charms and those sorts of things from Strahd. He's very useful from the player perspective, and I really like his story. He's one of my favorite destined allies to hope for in the card reading. Oh, and Casimir even has magic items that can be used even if he dies. So there's that. He is susceptible to dying pretty quickly if he gets focused down, so the players still need to protect him, and it's not just an automatic win. But I say Casimir is S tier because it really does make it easy mode if you get Patrina, and even if you don't, savvy players can use him very effectively, and he makes a very interesting story. Very few characters can tie into the Amber Temple the way he does, and he's not an automatic ally like other NPCs we talked about. So I'm going to go S tier with the DM perspective. Next up is Mordenkainen, the Mad Mage. I really don't like Mordenkainen in this module, to be honest. He'd be interesting if he wasn't Mordenkainen, and he just feels like he was plopped in for the Forgotten Realm's sake and for the book coming out about him. Getting the Mad Mage involved with the campaign is also one of the most awkward things I've encountered, and so I really don't like him. Yes, he can be powerful, but he's also only useful in the final fight because the book straight up says he kind of writes himself out of the story. He's definitely a bench warmer. He's not as easily killed or anything like that, but there's just not enough benefit for him, and he's really awkward from the DM perspective to work into the story. Mordenkainen can go take a break. Next up is Nikolai Wachter Sr., the one who's dead. I have to love this one because having a destined ally who is already dead just feels right. It's super interesting. Valaki's already full of political intrigue, and I think it's fun if the players realize their ally is already dead and they have to figure out what to do with that. And the book does give you some ideas of how to raise him up, including the Abbot and the spell scroll of Raise Dead from Van Richten. Rictavio, I should say. The politics in Vallaki take a dramatic turn if Nikolai is raised, and that's an experience that I don't think any other group would get, because I don't think people would think to raise him up from the dead. Let me know if that's happened to you when he wasn't the destined ally, because I think you have very interesting players. If you need the abbot to help raise him up, you're going to need to get the abbot a wedding dress from the burgomaster's house, which again ties into more Vallaki intrigue. I'm actually going to say that Nikolai, even though he's not very powerful and his personality isn't very hashed out in the book, to me he stands out as a very interesting ally, and I'm going to give him the A tier. Also, it might be nice to have his money on your side, even though his house is so dilapidated and Fiona might not like that. But that's your fun to explore. Next up is Pariwimple, aka Parpol Cantemir. This guy is a Chad. I love him. He's so strong and able-bodied and such a good guy. I don't think he's very interesting as a destined ally beyond him just being useful for the party. I don't think he's as interesting as Donovich, so I'm going to put him in the B tier below Donovich. Again, he is very strong. Like, check out his stats. He is a straight up brute. The party that lacks a brutish fella, a barbarian or a fighter, any kind of frontliner, is going to beg for this guy's help. And it probably won't occur to them to try to recruit him. He's one of those NPCs that is not an automatic ally or even an obvious person to try to recruit. And I think it's also very fun to try to get him out of Bildrath's clutches and convince him to come help you. I've already had some discussions with other people running the game who see how interesting that can be to kind of make Bildrath a bit of a villain and try to figure out how to make the good-natured Pariwimple leave that duty and that family. And there's a lot you can do with him. He's just not one of the standouts as like the most interesting. I like Pariwimple, though. You would not be disappointed getting him if you put the effort into it. Next up is Piddlewick II, the little toy murderer. Little Chucky doll. If you want to play up the dolls in the module, you really can have some fun with this one. I'm mostly sticking to the module as written for this, but Ravenloft's setting has more support for the doll theme through the like soul swapping dolls. I already have a friend who's doing a lot with that, and the party's really becoming paranoid about dolls, and there's a lot he's accomplishing with it, even just early on. So Piddlewick II, he's interesting because to recruit him, he's probably going to be in the very tippy top one of the towers of Castle Ravenloft. You're going to have to get them up there, the party, to recruit him, first of all. But if they do, he can actually become a guide around Castle Ravenloft, which can really ease your burden as a dungeon master to try to get the players to interact with Ravenloft. One of my great regrets when I've run the module is I didn't give the players enough time in Ravenloft. They always felt like if they go there when I don't tell them to, that they're going to die and they're like rushing the end game. Give them more reasons to go there, and Piddlewick can be part of that. So I'm going to put him, he's not as powerful as Donovich or Pariwimple, for sure. I'm going to put him in the B tier, but I do think he is far more interesting than either of them, especially because he cannot talk. And so I'm actually going to put him at the top of the B tier, ahead of Donovich and Pariwimple. He's, again, not a great combatant, but that can make him really great for using the Inspire ability that comes with a Destined Ally, and he technically does qualify to be a sidekick if someone treats him really well. Being a construct also comes with some benefits as well. So I like Piddlewick II. He can be super interesting, and he plays into the gothic horror and that doll side, and he also makes it so you can have more to do with Blinsky, which, if your campaign is no fun, is no Blinsky. That's the answer. Get Blinsky involved, and Piddlewick II helps with that theme. Next up is Rudolph Van Richten, or Rictavio, depending on what part of the campaign you're in. Van Richten is one of the NPCs who I consider to be an automatic ally, but he is not as easy to recruit. So I have run campaigns where the party didn't even see him till the end, and he's not as automatic as the others. He can be very interesting because of his tragic nature, and he's obviously very useful. But he doesn't really have ties to Barovia, and he is kind of a very opinionated guy. He's a monster hunter. Having him take a backseat to the characters and what they want to do just doesn't feel right. But he does acquiesce to the prophecy about him, so maybe that's why he acquiesces to what they think they should do. Regardless, I'm going to have to put him in the C tier. I don't think he's very interesting as a Destined Ally. Again, interesting character, making the distinction between character and Destined Ally status. Is he more interesting than Esmeralda? He's less automatic than she is, and he does amplify her story, especially if they have some beef about finding his journal and she finds out that their history together is not necessarily what she thought it was, or at least that he is not consistent in the way he tells the story. It's a little bit confusing, though. Chris Perkins said one is a lie and one is the truth if you look at their backstory. Maybe they're both lies, I don't know. And maybe I'm misquoting him. It's been a while since I heard the quote. But I think he is the most interesting of these three in the C tier, so I'm going to put him right there. All right, next up is Sir Godfrey Gwillem, the powerhouse in my S tier ranking, the only one who hit the S tier in my player perspective. He's obviously incredibly strong. He's got spell casting. He's a warrior. He is a revenant, so he can't really die. He's just going to come back. He's got regeneration, anti-Strahd paralysis stuff, extra damage to Strahd, always knows where Strahd is. This guy is incredible. But from the DM perspective, is he good for the game? Is he too strong? I think a little bit maybe too strong, but I think it's worth it if the story has been interesting, especially if you're not playing with like optimizers who are just gonna use him to mop the floor with Strahd. If your party does get Godfrey as the destined ally, it opens it up to use more minions and some of the other characters in Castle Ravenloft without worrying about overly swarming the party. I really like that he's one of the main people in Argynvostholt, really maybe the only one who makes Argynvostholt really feel alive, in that the party will want to recruit him. And there's a few ways to do it, including a persuasion check that might fail, and restoring Argynvostholt by returning the skull. Finding the skull was one of every campaign that I've run, one of the favorite mysteries for the players to figure out. None of them achieved it, but some of them did find out where it was before things got dicey, and so it's a really cool plot point to explore, I find, for players. I know some people don't like Argynvostholt very much. They don't think it fits the module very well, or they think it's clunky or not hashed out enough. I think it's great as it is, and Godfrey really makes it. If he is the destined ally, it's high risk, high reward. You gotta do the dragon skull heist out of Ravenloft. But again, I really like anything that pushes the players into Castle Ravenloft before a final confrontation with Strahd. And Godfrey is one of those who can do it. He also is still problematic in social encounters going into towns because he's clearly a undead creature that will not be well liked. You'll have to leave him out. I find Godfrey extremely interesting, and even if he is so powerful, I would not worry about my party having him, so I'm going to keep him in the S tier. He doesn't have the Amber Temple ties and then the Ravenloft ties like Casimir. Because Argynvostholt isn't the most important place for the characters to go, I am going to place him right here, just behind Casimir in the S tier. From DM perspective, Destined Allies. Really great ally, but I really prefer Casimir's story. Sir Klutz is next. What a funny character, especially as a destined ally. He's a ghost, and so he can do things that no one else in the party can do, and none of the other NPCs can do. He can move through walls. He's not a bad warrior either. He's pretty survivable. I really actually think that exploring his backstory, since he can't really remember things, and he predates Strahd turning into a vampire when he died, and so Sir Klutz could be super interesting to explore. And again, I find him campaign defining in the abilities he gets as a ghost, and that you have to go into the crypts to get him, kind of like Casimir's Patrina. I'm going to put him in the A tier. I really like him as a destined ally. I'm going to place him definitely ahead of Nikolai and Irina. Is he more interesting than Davian and or Arigal? He doesn't tie into any of the quest lines like they do, and so I'm going to place him right here in the middle of the A tier. Sir Klutz is great. Good ally. Stella Wachter is next. The cat girl, thanks to Viktor Volakovich, and Fiona really wants to get her back to normal. I really like the Wachter house and the political intrigue of Vallaki, and Stella's right in the middle of it. I really enjoyed when the party recruited the abbot to restore her, and I like that she's independent and doesn't like her mother, and so when she's healed, she just wants to go stay at the church if it wasn't destroyed from the feast. I like Stella. Trying to heal her is interesting. Once she's healed, I don't think there's a lot for her to do, though she is weak enough to be a sidekick. So she ends up being a bit of a bench warmer, but up until she's recruited, her story's pretty interesting. More so than Arabelle, in my opinion, and the way she interacts with Victor could be interesting. I'm going to put her at the end of the C tier. If you're really creative and careful, you can do a lot with Stella. She helps you get ingrained in Vallaki, gets you involved with Kresk if you need some healing from the abbot, and then you have the wedding dress. But between those two places, that's about it. Stella can be great. If your party gets her, don't think that it's a bad ally or anything. She's middling, you can have some fun with her. Vasilka is next. She was so interesting in the campaign that I ran where she was the destined ally. They had a Tempest cleric who could rain down lightning on enemies and hit her at the same time to heal her. Them dealing with the abbot and getting her to turn against him was super interesting. I'm going to put her in the S tier. I love Vasilka. Such an interesting character. Again, she's an undead, kind of like Godfrey, so she'll give you some trouble when you're going around towns, and she is tough to recruit. High risk, high reward. The abbot is no weakling, and even if they do put him on the ropes to the point where he has to flee, they have to worry about him coming back because he's not going to let Vasilka get away. She's the key to saving Barovia. He cannot let her get destroyed or lose her sense of purpose. She's a flesh golem, so obviously her stats are pretty strong. Don't let her hit points to get too low. Don't let her get touched by fire, because then she can become a bit of a liability or less effective. But Vasilka, man, especially if you don't have a bruiser in your party already, she's incredibly strong and interesting. Definitely someone who can help you wreck Strahd and can be campaign defining as a destined ally. Really great. Viktor Vlahovic. He has spellcasting comparable to Casimir, and he has a story that is ingrained in Vallaki. He's a pouty boy with a lot of issues, and he's done some horrible things, which makes him pretty interesting. I know that from the DM perspective, I may be being a little too generous because I'm seeing it starting to weigh up towards the top here, but maybe it's because I think that with the right creativity, a lot of these are set up for success. He's definitely more interesting than these B-tier characters, and more powerful, except for maybe Periwinkle. I find that his story does get a little bit stale, and players might not always like his attitude, but he wants to get out of Barovia, and if he needs to defeat Strahd to do so, he's pretty stalwart in that. I don't think he stands out because he's just a magic user who can be recruited, and he doesn't like change the story in any way. So I'm going to put him at the top of the B tier. He's in the A tier for sure from the player perspective of like how powerful he is. He definitely has great spells, not as good as Casimir, but Victor's story is interesting within the realm of Vallaki itself, and you can have some fun with him elsewhere, developing his attitude and his character. It just takes a little bit more work than some of the other characters. King of the B tier for sure. Last but not least is Zuleka Tornescu of the Werewolves. The Werewolves are one of those plot points and those areas of the map that you need to work to get players to go there. But I find players often will find the Werewolves intriguing. They like to defeat Kirill. They like trying to decide what to do with Emil because he's still evil, but he's like the lesser of two evils with the pack leaders. Yeah, Zuleka is pretty cool. I've had some fun with the characters interacting with her, though I've still never had characters go inside the werewolf den. They've gone outside it and addressed, what is it? Is it Bianca, the one who was Kirill's mate because they killed Kirill elsewhere, but never gone inside, never fully explored the werewolves. So Zuleka is interesting because she's kind of like Davian Martikov because she has lycanthropy. She can give the players lycanthropy, but she's more evil. She's more of a liability. She'll still want to side with Emil, who wants to create more werewolves and may want to go against Strahd. So that's interesting. I'm going to say that she can be campaign defining because she's definitely going to bring some of that evilness into the group, and far less subtle than, say, Arigal. I don't think she's as interesting as Davian, but I do think she is going to be more interesting than Sir Klutz. So I'm going to put her in the middle of the A tier. She's, again, got the lycanthropy survivability. She's a strong character that I would recommend for any party to have as a distant ally if you want them to be more involved with the werewolves. She is someone who can push you into Castle Ravenloft because that's where Emil is, her mate. She wants him freed. So that's another point towards her. So that's my tier list. You know, I've got Cloven in the F tier for both of my lists, my article and now this tier list video. I don't regret it. And then we've got Arabelle and Mordenkainen in the D tier, Van Richten, Ismark, Esmeralda, and Stella in the C tier. I know some people won't like that, but I really stand by that. I just don't find it as interesting to make them destined allies. That's all. Great characters otherwise. Destined allies, kind of a waste. B tier, Victor, Piddlewick, Donovich, and Periwinkle. A tier, Arigal, Davian, Zuleka, Sir Klutz, Irina, and Nikolai. And then the S tier, which I think are the greatest destined allies to have in your party and in your story, are Casimir, Godfrey, and Vasilka. I'm eager to hear what you think. Are some of these characters more interesting than I give them credit? Are any of them not as interesting as you think? I'd love a discussion because this is obviously subjective just to my experiences and opinions. And I'd love to hear yours because I do plan on running Curse of Strahd again in the future, and I will definitely want to make the most of whatever destined ally my party gets. So I cherish your ideas. And if you made it this far into the video, tell me who your favorite destined ally is. And you can also go to my article that I mentioned earlier by following the link. And there is a poll there if you want to fill that out. I'm going to publish that later to see who everyone's favorite destined allies are. Alright, so that's it. I love Curse of Strahd. I plan on doing more content for it, so let me know if you're into it, and subscribe if you want to see more of it, so you can scry on me just like Strahd would want you to, and I'll give you more content. Check out flutesloot.com, and I, Flutes, will see you in the next video.